All right, starting off with a blank canvas, the first thing I'll do is click on the Koopa connector, which I've configured. Then I can click and drag the activity I want. In this case, I'll drag the query over, and I'll double click on it, and I can open up the wizard. So it'll automatically fetch a list of all the available objects to query. I'll type in the search bar to filter it down, and I'll select expense reports. Then on the next step, I can choose the sub-object. In this case, I'll be querying all expense reports rather than filtering by a specific ID. And it'll give me the schema for the request and response. Then once we build out the project a little more, I can then start feeding in some data for the request. In this case, I am required to at least fill out those bottom three at the bottom under the query header. In this case, I will be filling out that I want to find all expense reports that have a total that is greater than or equal to 100. And keep in mind that I could be querying for any object here, just in this example, I'm using expense report. And also, you'll notice that there are some other fields at the top, including offset, order by, direction, so on and so forth. I won't be using those in this example, but those are available to you as well. Once I have that configured, I will build out the rest of this project where basically I'm just going to grab all the expense reports in Koopa that were created after a certain date, and I will be putting them into a database. And I will be grabbing all of the columns that are available to you in the UI of Koopa, as you can see here. So once I click run on this project, all of the data that I'm seeing here will be present in my database, which I've configured behind the scenes. Now that I've clicked run, I will see a real-time status update that lets me know how far along it is. And once it says success, I can move over to the database and see that all the data is in fact there. Once I refresh the database, I see that I have my expense by, total, status, ID, and submit date columns that are now filled out with information from my Koopa instance. And once again, keep in mind that I could be using any object in Koopa for this. And with that in mind, let's move on to the next activity that comes with the Koopa connector. In this case, it's create. And again, let's start with a database. This time I'll be using the department object just to keep it simple. And here's some example data I've loaded into my database that I want to push into Koopa. And to do that, I click and drag the create activity over from the right into my canvas. And then I double click into that, which pulls up the wizard. Now I can type department into the filter and choose that object from the list of all of the available objects in Koopa. Then, next step is to choose the sub-object. In this case, I have one choice, so I'll click that. And I can see the request and response schemas. Now, once I have that Koopa create activity configured, it's up to me to just build out the rest of my project within Cloud Studio. Here you can see I am mapping over the data from the left side, which is my database, into the right, which is the Koopa request schema, which is specific to the object I selected when I was configuring the create activity. And now, as you can see in Koopa, I have automatically ported in all the data from my database without having to manually go in and type each one out. And we have one more activity that is available with the native Koopa connector. In this case, it is update. So again, I'll click and drag it over into the canvas, give it a name, double click into it, and it pulls up another wizard that lets me automatically configure this update activity. So again, it'll pull up a list of all the available different objects within Koopa. In this case, I'll stick with the department example from the create activity. So I'll type it in the search bar, click it, go to the sub-object, click that option there, and it pulls up the request and response schemas. Now back in my database, I can make some changes to the department data I have from before. So I'll change the name of one of these, and I will change the active status of some others. I'll save that change in my database. And now that I have that project built out with the update activity, I can click run. It'll show me a real-time status update, and once both of these say success, I'll know it has successfully updated Koopa with those changes I just made in the database. And I can click over into Koopa, go to the departments, filter by the last time they were updated, which is today, click search, and I can see the name changed to research and dev, and the other ones are marked as inactive. That was a brief overview of the 3 native activities that come with our Koopa connector, those being query, create, and update. I use 2 different objects available within Koopa for these examples. For the query activity, I did expense reports, whereas for create and update, I used departments. But again, I just want to remind you that every available object in Koopa can be used in these activities, and every individual object per each activity will have its request and response schemas generated as per the Koopa API documentation. I hope that was helpful in understanding how our native Koopa connector in Jitterbit Cloud Studio works, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions. Thanks for watching. To access the NetSuite Koopa Master Data Management Template, log into Jitterbit Harmony and navigate to the Marketplace. Then you can find the template by using the search bar at the top or the filters on the left. From there, you can download a detailed PDF document that goes into detail on how to use this template. Once you've read that, go ahead and click the Start Project button. This template will add 4 projects to your Cloud Studio library. To make them easier to find, the wizard will prompt you to add a prefix to all of them. Then select an environment and click Create Projects. As described in the PDF documentation, these 4 projects need to be run in order. However, the first thing you need to do is to add your credentials for both NetSuite and Koopa, as I'm showing on screen. You can find these variabilized credentials along with your email credentials for sending failure notifications in the Project Variables tab. We highly recommend you also apply a schedule to every flow of the template. This will allow for your master data management to be automated. Head to the Settings tab as shown here to do that. Or you could run on demand like I will now by clicking the Run button. This first flow of the template is responsible for syncing NetSuite vendors to Koopa suppliers. I've created this example vendor in NetSuite, which will be automatically mirrored into a Koopa supplier once this flow is done. I'll use the Run button to kick off this operation, but keep in mind you can automate these flows using a schedule, which will allow you to have them run automatically as often as once every minute. Once the operation is complete, I can open up the log to see a summary of what data was synced over, as well as any failures if there were any. To verify that the data sync was complete, I can search for that supplier in Koopa and see that it is present with the data I entered in NetSuite without me having to do any manual data entry. Moving on to the second flow of the template, which is responsible for a bidirectional sync between NetSuite employees and Koopa users. I've created a new employee in NetSuite, which will then show up in Koopa as a user. Keep in mind, this will also sync over any existing employees or users that have been updated since the last time the flow was run. Again, once the flow is complete, I can open up the logs to see a summary of failures and successes. In this case, I do see one failure because an email was already taken, so Koopa rejected that. In the Success Summary section, I can see that a new Koopa user was created and an existing user was updated. Now in Koopa, I can go to the Users section and search for that new user I just created to verify it was synced over successfully. I'll have a very similar experience with the third flow of the template, which is responsible for syncing NetSuite accounts to Koopa accounts. By default, this will automatically grab accounts in NetSuite marked as expense accounts and sync them into Koopa, like this landscaping account I created. Finally, I can sync my NetSuite departments to my Koopa lookup values. Also keep in mind that everything I'm showing here is simply the default behavior of this template. If you want to change the behavior of these flows by adding your own custom business logic, or even add your own entire new data flows, Cloud Studio makes this easy to do. These 4 flows were created by our team with best practices in mind, meaning they're designed to be easily changed to meet your business's specific needs. And alongside Jitterbit University, you can use them as a guide to learn how to create your own data flows within Cloud Studio.